Hey investor friends, I'm Michelle Markey, and today I'm going to share my investing practice and thoughts based on Danielle and Phil Town's invested book, Chapter March, Voting for a Mission with My Money. And in the March chapter, Danielle asks the reader to spend 10 minutes of thinking about our investing office so we can get into the zone when we're practicing our investing, and also to create an atmosphere of what we think will get us to financial freedom. So towards those investing office and atmosphere of financial freedom ideas, I like having things like my favorite books around me to be able to concentrate on my investing, and also reliable notepad, and also computer systems with folders set up so that I can save articles, 10Ks, and annual letters that I can reread and reference when I'm thinking about what kinds of investments to make. And I like being in comfortable clothes when I invest. And I also like having pictures of my family around to keep me motivated. And in a similar way to Danielle, it's so that I can help take care of them someday if I become financially successful. And also, I like hanging out at my computer desk when I'm doing some hardcore spreadsheet calculations, or I like nestling on a comfy couch when I'm doing some deep, quiet reading. So those are some of my ways that I try to have an investing office and an atmosphere that gets me into the zone of investing. Danielle asks us to also think about what will support us when our investing practice gets difficult. And this makes me think of and want to do sports. So I try to take a little bit of a break and take some time to go exercise and play with some sporting equipment so that I can clear my mind and also think about my long-term goals, because I'd love to have the financial freedom to be able to live out this childhood dream of just being able to play sports, even if it's not competitive, and just be able to enjoy playing sports throughout my life. So this is a helpful reminder to me to be motivated to move towards that goal. I'd love to hear from you in a comment about what motivates you to strive for financial freedom and what gets you into your investing practice. And if you could please like and subscribe to my video and YouTube channel, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks. I like how Danielle talks about the history of a corporation and how she thinks of it as a legal fiction that was created so that we can invest in it, while we're also shielded from any liabilities that a corporation or company might take on, like debts. So that was called limited liability. And she says it's a double-edged sword, because while it's nice that we as individual investors are not on the hook for any of the things that a company might do, it also prevents us from being as directly benefited or affected by a company's day-to-day actions, such as what a company's management might choose to do. So although we as shareholders of a company technically own the company, the management gets to make the decisions, and the information that you would think owners should be privy to is not always made publicly available. So this kind of information asymmetry that Danielle describes is something that we as public shareholders just need to be able to deal with, and still try to do our best to study a company if we want to invest in it. I agree with, and I think this is the only way that we should be value-driven and mission-oriented investors, because we have a set of principles that we live by and that we expect the companies we invest in to live by. And that helps us to try to distinguish between what Danielle calls the angel and monster companies. And it helps us figure out what companies we think are behaving honorably or not. And what complicates this sentiment a little bit is when you're not sure exactly what some of the management and board of directors might be doing. So sometimes, although board of directors are elected by the shareholders and they have a fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interest of the shareholders or us as the owners, sometimes they're also very buddy-buddy with the executive management that they select, like the CEO. And when you have a board of directors that decides the pay compensation for CEOs, we can easily end up with mercenary CEOs that make 300 times what the average employee makes nowadays. And this used to just be 20 times what the average employee made about 50 or 60 years ago in the 1960s and 70s. And nowadays it's skyrocketed. And the only time it was worse was when it hit closer to 400 times an average employee salary around the dot-com bubble or the early 2000s. So depending on what kind of board of directors and executive management is at a company, that can make a big difference as to if we think a company is behaving in accordance with our shareholder values or not. A tricky factor to consider when we're evaluating the quality of the management team or the CEO is to think about what goes into their compensation or pay as a CEO and what they're incentivized by. So if they're incentivized to increase the price of the stock, they can do things like buying back shares of the company at whatever price, because it means that they might have been granted some options as part of their total pay package that gets more lucrative the higher the stock price goes. So that's just one other thing to consider when we think about if a CEO is acting in the best interest of shareholders too. I think a lot of us would agree with Danielle with the idea that we would want to vote our money or invest in companies that have a mission to change the world for the better. And they can be companies that aren't only doing good at the expense of returns, but they can be companies that will keep growing and that can be cash flow generating and that are well managed by managers with integrity. So I think that all of these things are very much possible. And I think there's actually forward momentum leading towards this idea that we vote for companies that do the right thing. And I'm looking forward to investing in companies that do that. We should all create our list of missions that we support. And similar to how Danielle jotted down her list of missions, I relate to them, and I feel like some of my missions that I would support include things like equitable pay and treating humans and animals humanely, trying to make the environment more sustainable, doing ethical things, and also helping our communities and buying local whenever possible. And there's so many more missions that are very feel good and that we can get behind. And some of the companies that I've either invested in or that I'm interested in investing in, I've also checked out some of their mission and values, and I'm going to share them here shortly. One company whose mission and values I don't think I appreciated enough when I first worked there as a teenager is Starbucks. And now that I'm a little bit more mature as an investor, I appreciate their mission to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. And they also have some values centered around their customers and coffee and their employees. And I like the themes of their values in that they create a warm and welcoming culture where everyone belongs, and they promote accountability and transparency, and they want to be the best that they can be. I also appreciate the environmental and societal impact Starbucks is striving to have by ethically sourcing its coffee beans and training farmers so that their livelihoods improve and that the future long-term sustainability of the coffee crops can be ensured through better farming practices that are also good for the earth. I am definitely partial, but I really love Costco's straightforward mission of how they want to continually provide their members with the best quality goods and services at the lowest possible prices. And they also have a code of ethics to follow that. So I admire what Costco is all about, and I definitely benefit because I shop there quite often. Although I didn't quite find an exact Berkshire Hathaway mission, I can ascertain what some of that might be based on some of the annual letters where Warren Buffett has written some clues about what Berkshire Hathaway values. And he once wrote in his 1998 annual letter to the management of the companies that are subsidiaries of Berkshire Hathaway, and there's quite a lot of them, and I'm sure many of us have bought products and services from this gigantic Berkshire Hathaway list of subsidiaries. But anyway, some of what he gave as the mission to the executive teams running all of these operations include things like treat running this company as if it's the only asset you and your family will ever own, and that as if you're owners of the company, and to not sell it or merge it for at least a century. And some other factors that Warren Buffett frequently puts as an ad, he calls it in some of his older shareholder letters, includes how he wants to buy companies that have demonstrated earning power and that are simple enough to understand. If it's too technological, it will be too difficult for them to get, and that they have managements that are already in place and that have integrity. And so if some of these companies have good economics and capable management that has integrity, those reflect some of Warren Buffett's values of what he likes to do in running Berkshire Hathaway. And I think he's been pretty successful, and I think that they're some of the original proponents of sustainability. I know there's a lot of talk and buzz around the concept of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, but I think that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have incorporated values of ESG throughout the whole time of running Berkshire Hathaway, so I'm pretty stoked about Berkshire. Another company that I'm interested in and that I actually think about, like I benefit from this company quite a bit every time I use my credit cards, is Visa. And they say they have a simple and unwavering vision, and that's to be the best way to pay and be paid for everyone and everywhere, and to have a seamless experience across all the kinds of stakeholders that need to do payment transactions. So although I'm not fully sure, I haven't done all the research into this company yet, if I really want to invest in them, some of this just strikes me as very practical and something that I would value. So those are some of my examples of how I already vote with my money and whose values I support in companies that I'm either invested in or considering investing in, and what I'll do to further support my research into if I really want to commit to some of these companies is what Phil in this chapter calls investment story that one would like to make, and it considers 4 main things that start with M, and they include management, meaning, moat, and margin of safety, or it's also known as calculating the valuation of some of these companies in order to determine if it financially makes sense to invest at them at a certain price. So with some of that, those are some of what I'll be building on next as I progress in my research about these companies and if I'd like to invest in them in the future. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe. And I'd love to hear from you in a comment about what you do when you're approaching your investing practice and what mission and values you support. Till next time.